This is going to be really strange if you know me at all, but today I want to talk about the things that you should not expect from your contractor. In my time in construction, I've actually done a lot of different types of construction. I've done really high-end renovations. I've done them for customers. I've done them for my own flips. I've done additions and new building. I've even done some commercial work. And obviously now I do investor grade rehabs only. And for the most part, all of those different types of construction are basically like different industries. However, there is one thing that is the same between all of them. Obviously, there's more than just one thing, but one thing that I'm talking about today, which is the fact that the biggest issue is the misalignment of expectations between the customer and the contractor. And what I mean by that is understanding what should be expected. See, most of the time, the customer, this is especially true for residential type of construction. Things are a little bit different in commercial, but the customer thinks that the contractor does all different types of things. They're responsible for all these different types of things, which obviously is what we're going to talk about today. And then on the other hand, the contractors never even considered being responsible for those kind of things. And so what happens then is that the customer basically starts to think the contractor is a dirtbag. And then the contractor is like, oh, I've heard this from all kinds of different customers. They're another one of those types. And then, the headbutting happens, and then, they start to peel apart, and that makes the problem even worse. And that's kind of where the whole customer contractor dislike cycle begins and continues to pick up steam. So my goal here is to shed some light on the things that contractors don't think they're responsible for. However, usually customers do think they're responsible for those things. And I think shedding some light on these things could actually make for a much better relationship with the contractors that you work with. Therefore, you'll get better work out of them. They'll be more ready and available to do your projects. You'll probably get better pricing. You'll definitely have better relationships, which does provide some intrinsic value. So let's get right into it. Number one, I am reminded of back when I was in Denver. I hired this general contractor, and I had just left my corporate job at this time. So I had that corporate environment mindset. I managed in the corporate environment, and it's all about every leadership book you've ever read, which I'm not saying the real world is not like that, but it is a little bit different when you own the business than when you work inside of a corporate business. So I went in with that mindset that I was going to hire the advisors, one of those advisors being the general contractor, and I was going to trust them to do their thing. And I brought this guy in there. I think that I had met with multiple ones for this specific project. And basically I gave him carte blanche, I trust you as the professional, and you go in there and do your thing, man. I'm trying to make as much money as I can on this. I'm actually going to turn it into a rental, and basically, I'll see you at the end. Let me know when you need a paycheck. And actually thinking about it right now, dumbly enough, here's my budget. So this neighborhood was like a nice A to B class type of neighborhood. The other houses selling in that neighborhood had the quartz or granite countertops, the stainless steel appliances. A lot of them had hardwood floors throughout, had shaker cabinets, soft close most likely, had the nice sinks and the faucet. This general contractor was mainly doing a kitchen remodel for me. And so I handed it off to him. And of course, in my head, I had the vision of what every other house on that street had sold for. And that's what I thought I was getting. Fast forward to several weeks or months later, I don't even remember at this time, and he's asking for his payment. And I go into that project thinking that I was going to see what I had seen in the pictures on Zillow or the MLS. And sure enough, it wasn't even close. I had Formica countertops. I had the same cabinets were in there, but they were painted. I had this like 18 by 18 inch beige tile on the floor, which is like the same tile that you saw on the end cap at Home Depot earlier that week. You know what I'm talking about, the bargain stuff that's for sale that everybody could buy or everybody has bought. And sure enough, it was that same 18 by 18 inch tile that was cut down and used as the backsplash in the kitchen. The appliances, I think there were a couple new appliances, but some of it had stayed. It was like a disaster, not what you would expect at all. And that was one of the first times where I started to realize the truth here. However, it was not the time that got me to the actual truth. I guess I had to calculate all that later. In this first experience, I thought, just like where we started this discussion, that this was a crappy contractor and he was an idiot and so on and so forth. But now, over years of experience in similar circumstances, I realized that the truth is you can't expect your contractor to share the vision of a seasoned investor. It is your job as the investor to decide what needs to be done on that project. Now, this contractor could help give you advice on that. He could help be a guide for you, but he is not the one that sets up the scope of work. It is on you to learn how to build smart scopes of work, how to decide what is needed versus what is wanted. We talk about that a lot. How to decide the things that you're going to do to best create price efficiencies, the things that you need to do to maximize the profit on that property, and also the things that you shouldn't do because they don't optimize the profit on that project. Now, it sucks that it can't be easier than that, but I really don't think it is. I think that most contractors are not built for the investor grade rehabs anyway. Some of them will do it, but most construction contractors are in the mindset of retail type of renovations if they're doing renovations. Retail meaning for a customer who lives in the house. And that's just a whole different kind of thing. You do focus more on craftsmanship, and you do some things that you definitely would not do in an investment grade rehab. And you need to know that. Of course, you can explain that to them and such, but they're not going to have the same experience as you, and they are not going to be wired right for it because they've been trained to be retail contractors. Everybody in the game is trained for that, or commercial work. Basically, that comes down to this. If you leave ambiguity in your plan and expect the contractor is going to fill that with your vision, you will be disappointed, and you will probably blame the contractor, but I'm telling you, it's your fault. Okay, now number 2, the second thing you should not expect from your contractor. So let's go to this same story. All right, after I run into this kitchen situation, I had actually hired this contractor to do more on the same property. It was a triplex, so there was a lot going on there. So I hired him to do more. Obviously, after this experience, I'm blaming him. Therefore, I'm definitely thinking he's a crappy contractor. And so I tighten up my management just a little bit at this point. So I start going to the job site more often to figure out what's going on. And the thing is, and you got to realize at this point, my filter was a little bit messed up because I'm thinking he's a crappy contractor. So of course, everything I look at is going to be through that filter. But I'm going to the job site and he's like not there. And sometimes he's got guys showing up there that are subcontractors to him, but like maybe a couple times a week or whatever. And, like somebody would come and they would do a tile job and then they'd come back a few days later to do the grout for that tile job. And then the next week, maybe there'd be a painter that came by or whatever. And so now, especially since I'm looking through this filter, I'm like, what is up with this guy? He's not even at the job site working. But that's the thing. You see, I was so used to working with W-2 employees, people who I actually employed, or the company that I worked for at the time employed, and I could tell them what to do, when to be there, what time they should show up, what time they should leave, and they needed to be there every day. That's what I paid for, is for them to be there every day, just in case I had stuff that came up, I guess. Most of them had job responsibilities, but you get the point. That's what a W-2 employee does, is they show up for their 40 hours a week. But the contractors that you're hiring, they're 1099s. They have their own business. They show up when they want to show up. It is results based. It's not about how they got from point A to point B. It's about agreeing upon what point B is and letting them do their thing. And I didn't realize that at the time. And so, of course, that added to the frustration. But that is a thing that I see a lot with investors, is that they hire the contractor and then they expect that the contractor is going to be there at the job site every single day working until the project's done. And that's just not how it works, because there's no way you're the only project that they're working on. Their business wouldn't work otherwise. They need to be out there looking for their next job. They need to be out recruiting employees for themselves, or they need to be out getting materials. They need to be juggling a couple jobs at a time. I wish it wasn't that way, but it usually is. The only way you can prevent that is giving them what I call job confidence, which means that you have projects lined up for them to go to, and they actually believe that. So unless you can provide that for them, I would not expect them to be there every day. Now, you can expect that they get done in a reasonable time frame. They don't not show up for a few weeks or whatever, unless something has been agreed upon in advance. Like maybe it's an example here, a structural job that requires a specific steel beam to take out a wall, and that steel beam's on an order and it's not going to be here for 3 weeks. Obviously you would wait then, but you as the customer would know that was what's going on. Now, back to this same project back in Denver. We're into the project and I get the call for the change order. Right? Everybody knows what a change order is. That means the contractor found something that's extra that you're going to have to pay extra money for. And these are the GFCIs in the kitchen weren't working, the outlets, and the hot water tank was not working. And, remember, I already have this filter growing. He's already not showing up to the job site every single day like I thought he would be. And he also had a terrible vision for what I thought the project should be like. And so now there's this GFCI, hot water tank, and I'm livid, man. Like, how did you not know these things when you bid the job? Well, here's the truth of it, is that these guys have to bid a lot of jobs, or projects as we call them. A general contractor would typically bid a whole project, not just a single job. Usually the more specified contractors will do a specific job. And they're just not going to go around and look at every specific detail. This is not an argument on whether they should or shouldn't. I'm just telling you that usually they don't. If they did do that, the cost for them to do that, do a thorough inspection on every bid that they went, that would push your prices up so high that you couldn't hire that contractor. So maybe like really high-end contractors do that, but you're trying to keep your prices reasonable as well. And so you just don't see that in this game. So the point is, number 3, things that you should not expect from your contractor. They are not a home inspector. There are home inspection services where they do come in and they're going to crawl through the crawl space. They're going to come in with their moisture meters, their infrareds. They're going to come in with their different testing gear for the electrical to make sure it works. Some of them will do sewer scopes and make sure that the sewer line is proper. Some of them will do pressure tests on your water lines and your gas lines to make sure there's no leaks. They'll come in and test everything. They'll fill the sinks up with water and then drain them all, and they'll run the dishwasher and the hot water tank and garbage disposal, all of those things. But that is not what a contractor does before they bid a job. And so things are going to come up during the project. And honestly, some things are never going to get used during the project that they have a specific scope for. And it's going to come up afterwards. It's going to come up in the inspection resolution when you go to sell it. It's going to come up in the property manager's checklist if you hand it off for a rental. Because when a tenant is living in there, well, when you start living in a house, it's the ultimate test. But I don't expect those things from a contractor. They're going to have their specific scope of work, and that is what I expect from them. But the things outside of it, once again, rewind to number one, casting the vision, creating the scope of work. It's on you as the investor to make the right scope of work. Now, you can have guidance from the professional, or you can go out and hire a home inspector who will look for all those things. Or there are services who will create this scope of work for you that is in depth. But the contractor that you hire is not going to do that. And truly, I think that if you try to expect that from them, even if you do set the expectations, I don't think that's going to turn out well for you. I think that it's going to make you a person that's lower on their list to want to work with. And I think that you'll get subpar results as well. And one more thing, I'm sure that if a contractor is listening to this, they're maybe not liking that. However, if a contractor does offer that service, I would ask them how much extra you pay for stuff like that. I'm also not talking about a super sloppy scope of work. The things that they are going to do should be thorough. But I'm saying there's a separation between what a general contractor or any contractor should assess versus what home inspectors with all the proper tools and that being their main business will inspect, the detail that they will get into. I'm done with that one. Number 4, this one comes up a lot. You buy a house, you're getting ready to do the renovation, and so you bring the general contractor in, or a contractor of any type. You bring the contractor in and you start talking with them about the design, the layout, and you kind of expect them to tell you where things should be and so on and so forth. Or you want to remove a wall, or you have some serious structural issues and you're getting the answers from them and expect them to give you those answers. And this is the thing you have to understand. For one, don't trust a contractor to design the layout of your house that is going to sell more things. If you don't know how to do those things, go hire an architect. It's going to cost you a lot more money. So I would avoid anything where I needed an architect. But if you do want a design, hire somebody who does the design that helps you maximize the profit. Or better yet, learn how to design things that maximize the profit. Also, with an architect, some projects need plans to turn into the city to get permits. They have, specific requirements on the planning. And for one, I certainly avoid projects like that if I can, because it adds a whole new level of things. It obviously adds the direct cost of the architect, but then the scrutiny from the city would be higher, and basically everything that you do there, you would you would lose the ability to get things grandfathered, which is the one of the main advantages of doing rehabs as opposed to building new is you get to keep some of the things that are already there. The work has already been done for you. If you start having to redo everything from scratch, well, you've kind of lost that advantage. But do not expect the contractor to draw up these plans. Even if it's a simple floor plan, you do it then, and then turn it into the city to help with permits, or hire an architect who's trained to do those things. And now the other piece of this, number 4, is the structural. Well, in the code books, there are tables that basically say if a span is this long and it's got this many floors above it or whatever, it's this wide. This is the exact size of wood or steel that you use in that scenario. That is for all standard things, like a doorway opening, for example. Let's say that you want to take a doorway and instead of this is an exit door, instead of the 3-foot wide doorway, you want to put in a 6-foot wide patio door. Well, there is a table that says this is exactly how many jack studs you need. This is how many king studs you need. This is the size of header that you need across the top of it. And here's basically exactly how it needs to be installed. Great. If it's in the table, that is totally in a licensed contractor's wheelhouse. Wheelhouse. I know it's wheelhouse. I said wheeled house. That is in a contractor's wheelhouse. And within what is expected of them. If it is not in that book, got to get a structural engineer. The contractor should want to get the structural engineer in there because then the liability is off of them and on the engineer. You should also want that. You go to sell that house, it was done wrong, something bad happens, it's going to come back. If a structural engineer draws up the plan or writes the letter saying this is what needs to be there, and then you do that, well, it's not your issue. So number 4, do not expect your contractor to be an architect or an engineer. I may expect them to tell me when I've passed the point, meaning that they would say something along the lines of, oh, I might know the answer to that structural question that you just asked, but the truth is that is not in my zone. Therefore, I think that you should hire a structural engineer. Or maybe they work with structural engineers and they bring them in. Same thing with the planning. I cannot draw you those plans, but I do know this architect who can. But I always put it on myself to know those things and for me to take the action, for me to know that I shouldn't be asking the contractor those questions because I'm going to get an answer that is not going to be best suited for what we're doing here. 2 quick notes on this. If you have hired an architect or an engineer, they are the boss now. They supersede the contractor. Now, always you would hope that they would say something, but let me just give you an example, extreme example. Structural engineer is brought into the project and he draws up a plan that is totally wrong. And the contractor knows that this is not going to be sufficient to hold the load or whatnot. Hopefully he would say something to you, but the engineer is the boss. Therefore, the contractor would need to do those things. I'm saying this because I run into this a lot where one of these guys get brought into a project, but the customer still thinks the contractor is responsible for these things, and it usually runs into basically the customer thinking the contractor is not doing their job. However, the job has shifted. The responsibility has shifted. I guess it would be better if I explained some more realistic examples of this. The architect draws plans and they get passed through planning and you get the permits. And then the contractor is putting them together exactly as the plan states. However, they are failing inspections when the inspections come. And of course, the customer, the investor, is going to be mad that they didn't pass inspections, thinking the contractor is doing something wrong. However, they are blindly following the plans of the architect, which are actually wrong or not fully filled out. Now, the architect might be expecting that the contractor would be filling in the gaps here. And so generally, once the architect or the engineer is on the job, they are the boss. And I think you as the customer need to make sure they know that the contractor is not going to fill in gaps for them. They are the boss, and they need to make sure that they act accordingly. That is not to say that great vendors working with good contractors, they're not going to speak up and say, hey, I think this is wrong. I think you should do something about that. But you need to know how things go generally so you can prevent against it. And then number 5, this is a big one, and it happens really often that, maybe you got a loan from hard money lender or a bank or whatever, and they have a specific way they want their scope of work or, specific like construction logs that they need filled out for them to be able to release draws is a great example. Maybe you personally have a specific spreadsheet that you like to do for every project. Or maybe you downloaded some app that you want to start using to streamline your projects. And then you ask the contractor that you've hired to do these things. Hey, I need you to make your scope of work like this. I need you to send in these construction logs or, get all your guys on this app. And well, obviously what we're talking about, I don't think that you should expect that from your contractor. I think it's a really bad idea because the goal is that you keep the surgeons at the table. And these guys are contracting. They're not good at the admin stuff. They're not, wanting to use new apps. Use apps that they already use, like text message, for instance, is an app on their phone. They probably use that one. Use it. If you have a special scope of work that you need filled out, well, you fill it out. Take whatever they've given you and adjust it, adapt it to fit your thing. Why would you want them to learn this new thing? Because all that's actually going to do is it's going to cost them extra time. Now, you might get that time for free because they've contracted that job or that project at a certain rate, and then the added work, it's like, oh, all right, I guess I'm not going to charge for refilling out this scope of work because that would be weird. So I guess I'll just stay up after work and fill this thing out. And then what happens is it does cost them a lot of time. Maybe they don't bill you for it on that one. But what happens is, man, that investor's job, he's always got these extra things and it always costs me way more time. And now he just got put down on my priority list. He's not the best customer. I don't want to work with that guy. It cost us too much money. And, like a lot of these guys aren't tracking their expenses really tightly. Therefore, they're not going to know that. They're just going to know that it's kind of crappy and they don't like it. And bye-bye. There's other people to work with out here. So what is the 5th thing I do not expect from contractors that we hire is to be my admin. Now, you got to take all these things with a grain of salt. Of course, there are always exceptions to these rules, but these are the rules that we go by. And truly, once you start really building relationships with these guys and building trust, well, some of those things you can start to maybe not expect, but you'll get those things from a good contractor. Maybe they'll start adjusting the way that they do scopes of work. Maybe they will be more confident and more relaxed and maybe saying something about the architect's plans being wrong. Or maybe they will start to understand how you lay out your projects, the vision that you have as an investor, and start to adapt accordingly. That does happen over time. And that's why, I say a lot of these things about building relationship capital with these guys, because the longer relationship you can have with these guys, the more you start downloading together, aligning naturally. We spent a lot of time talking about the things that you should not expect from your contractor. But there are 3 things that I think that you should absolutely expect from your contractor every time. And here are those 3 things. 1 is delivering the scope of work, delivering the project exactly as you agreed upon in your written scope of work. Now, it is on you to make sure that you have a detailed written scope of work, and it is further on you to make sure that you are both aligned with it. So we've done a lot of content on how you make sure everybody is aligned, how you make sure that there is media that follows the format of the scope of work. Therefore, you both know that you have agreed upon it and you've agreed upon the same thing, and you can recall it later. You're not recalling it as a gotcha. It's more of a, like, everybody's got so much going on, it's easy to forget details, but not if you get it in video and written form. So number 1 thing that I absolutely expect is that once we've agreed upon that scope of work, it is delivered exactly like we talked about. No exceptions, unless they were pre-agreed upon. Number 2, delivering the project fully meaning fully completed, on or before the timeline that was agreed upon, or communicating prior to that date that there is a shift in schedule. And that last part is very important because, a lot of times projects don't land how they should. There are a lot of things outside of contractors' control. And, truly, I guess I'm sympathetic because I have dealt with the pains of trying to wrangle crew members to job sites and such. And so I understand when things come up. I also understand city stuff. Sometimes me as the investor, I'm the problem. I'm holding things up for whatever reason. And so it's not that I expect, on January 1st, they tell me it's going to be 120 days. And, I have that spot marked on my calendar. No matter what, if they don't hit it, it's going to be a problem. It's not like that. It is that last line, communicating prior to that date with a shift in schedule. So we get to day 60 of the 120, and they're like, hey, man, these things came up. I don't think I'm going to be able to hit that schedule anymore. Let's move that out. Okay, great. Now I can plan accordingly. That's what this is all about. Or let's take less of a project and just a job. They're supposed to be done by Friday. That's what we agreed upon. They call me on Thursday. Hey, man, we're just not going to be able to get done by Friday. I'm sorry that I messed this up. And, first thing I'm going to say is, did you really not know till Thursday, man? Maybe if you would have told me Wednesday, that would be better, because I have the painters coming in next week. And now if you're not going to be done, I have a problem. Okay, but anyway, why that is so important for me, for them to let me know in advance, is if I decide it's so important that this contractor coming on Monday, I can't push him out, then I could go send in a handyman crew, or for us, an internal crew, to go in and solve this problem, get that thing to the finish line, even though I know it's going to cause issues and whatever, it might end up costing me more money. At least I have the option to make things work. Likely you would just push that guy out next week, so that way, he doesn't come to an incomplete job. But that is usually a really big problem, because we talk a lot about these guys. You're always thinking about the job confidence with them. So you definitely don't want to become the guy that's always pushing out a project, because they need to have work to go to every day. And so if you push out the project, it really messes up their schedule. And so usually if I knew that whatever, the drywall guys that we're talking about were supposed to be done by Friday, so I had the paint lined up on Monday. Well, I would never do that. What I would do is, if he told me it was going to be done on Friday, I would have the painters start like next Wednesday or Thursday. That way I always leave a little bit of cushion in there, because really, like, the time on project is not, it's not lost on those like few days in between. That's not where you lose all your time. It's where you lose all your time is when you had the painter lined up for Monday, the drywall guy doesn't tell you he's not going to be done on Friday, so then the painter, you end up last minute having to push that painter, but he's like, well, I'm not going to wait a couple days for you. I got to go take the next job in line. And so he starts the next job in line, but then he doesn't come back to you until, whatever weeks later. That's where all your time is lost. So these few days buffer is a strong strategy to make sure you stay on time, on a decent timeline in your budget of time. Number 3 thing that you absolutely should expect is any job that they do should be able to pass an inspection. Okay, so there are some things that we're purposefully not going to do, hoping to be grandfathered in, but if they do something, it needs to be able to pass a codes enforcement inspection, even if permits are not being pulled. And so, like, I've run into that one before where whatever, we didn't, permits weren't pulled on a specific project, or maybe the contractor thought that permits weren't going to be pulled on a specific project, and they went and did their job, and then I'm like, hey, I got to get this inspected, and the inspection didn't pass, and they come back to me and they're like, well, I didn't know that permits were going to be pulled on this one. And so, and I'm like, you cut corners and didn't do it right. And, the thing is that there's no world where you expect work to be done in a way that couldn't pass an inspection, because even if you're whatever, once again, not a Boy Scout, you make your own decisions as a investor here. But if you are not pulling permits because you think you don't have to, or you think you, whatever your strategy is, well, there's always a chance that you change your mind later, or your mind gets changed for you. And so don't be doing stuff that doesn't fit codes, that is against codes. It's not wise. It's a liability for you, and it will come back to bite you. So let's bring this back full circle. My problem early on in being an investor and a customer of these contractors is that my expectations were wrong. And my wrong expectations led to frustration with these contractors, which led to a filter that I always looked through when talking to contractors. Ultimately, it left me so frustrated that I ended up starting my own construction company, because I felt like that's what I needed to do to be able to prevent these problems. And of course, I'm glad I did that. Wouldn't have been able to do what I did without knowing how to do the construction piece. And that really is like the key control in real estate. It's like your defense. But I definitely didn't need to do that because of the frustration that I had. What I needed to do was get my mind right and understand what the appropriate expectations were, and then hold ruthless accountability to those expectations, but not the wrong expectations. Once again, everything with a grain of salt. There are some cases where I absolutely expect one of those things on the not expect list. This is a generalization, and you as an investor need to get as much knowledge as you can so that you can create your own big picture plan, and then you'll understand how these little details fit in it. Like, maybe in general you don't expect that thing, but for this specific situation, I absolutely expect this thing because I understand my big picture well, and this is how it works, so on and so forth. Good luck out there, and check out some of our other content, and you can keep picking up skills and knowledge so you can create your big picture plan.